Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we are looking at a ship that is both interesting and at the same time isn't. Yep, this is a new Tier 10 premium battlecruiser. Yes, I'm calling it a battlecruiser because that's what it was. This is the Sevastopol, the sister ship of the Kronstadt. And as such, well, probably somewhat interesting from a historical perspective. Because the Soviets started out with building relatively large heavy cruisers and eventually wanted these to be counter to the Washington design of, or the Washington limitations of the treaty for heavy cruisers. So namely things that could kill cruisers that had to 8-inch guns and deal with them. So similar to, say, the Alaska or what the Japanese had been planning. And to that effect, they put 305mm main guns in 3 triple turrets in these ships. And at least that was the plan for the Projekt 69. But the Soviets also had a deal with the Germans. And that deal was give us some tech and you get some raw materials. And one of the things that they really would like to have had were the 380mm guns that, in a curious parallel, the Germans had actually planned to replace the main guns on the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau with. Because the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau only had the 283mm guns and they were considered insufficient at the time. So that never happened really because, well, sort of a war was going on and the Germans were busy. They needed the ships. They didn't have time to put them in dock for months to replace the main turrets. So there was a certain amount of a certain convergence of interest here, as in the Soviets really wanted these 380mm twin turrets and the Germans sort of had a couple because they were planning to use them for the Gneisenau and the Scharnhorst but did not really get to actually use them. So eventually the deal was struck. Now, the deal as such was somewhat political because, well, the ones who had made the deal were Stalin and his bureaucrats. The ones who had to deal with the fallout of it was the Naval Design Department. Because suddenly you had a cruiser that was designed to carry 305mm guns to carry 380 mils. And it's not that much of a difference, yes, but it comes with a different set of rangefinders and more requirements for power and all kinds of things. So once they had incorporated the 380mm turrets that the Germans were supposed to be delivering, the design was suffering a little bit because, well, these things were larger and significantly heavier. And now the ship was losing stability because new bits had to be attached to the superstructure to make things work. It needed more power. It was deeper down in the water. And in general, well, not quite as good. But in the end, they called it the Projekt 69I. I don't know if that stands for import. But they did lay down some bits, but nothing really ever came of it because I believe the German didn't actually deliver the guns in the end. And like I said in the very onset, there was a bit of a war going on and then the whole thing just ground to a halt anyway. But it's a very interesting parallel that both the Germans and the Soviets were trying to build battlecruisers or we will call them battlecruisers. And we're both trying to up-arm them to the 380mm guns from the Gneisenau. So this is in the game the version of the the Projekt 69I variant with the Gneisenau's turrets. That would be the Sevastopol. So it's a paper ship, but it's a paper ship with an interesting history. And this is where the interesting bit stops, unfortunately. Now, I don't want to have you to listen to, well, we're like 4 minutes 30 into the video. I don't want to have you listen to another 25 minutes of me complaining about things. So let's keep it relatively brief. Let's begin comparing the ship to some of her sisters. Once that pops up. There we go. Sevastopol, Stalingrad, also tier 10. Let's compare the two. Sevastopol gets all the ship skills. She has an engine boost 3, a Def AA3. She's got sonar, and she's got a precise aiming 1, but only 2 charges of it. She also gets auto secondaries, and she gets the British Super Heal. So from the British Battlecruisers, the heavy repair team. I am starting to get the feeling that there's a hat. And at the beginning of a new ship design, all the possible things get thrown into the hat, and then somebody draws 4 or 5 of them and says, this is the mixture that we're going to go with today. Right, so Sevastopol, interestingly enough, actually better armored than the Stalingrad class supercruisers, but also worse in her maneuverability, and we're not even going to start with the Kronstadt. And yes, these are the Gneisenau's 380mm main guns, and with a very reminiscent layout of the Gneisenau, with 6 of them in 3 twin turrets, compared to the 305s, which were what the Stalingrad was, well, supposed to be having for real. They obviously do more damage, and they do have a decent range, but less so than on the Stalingrad. But here it kind of stops, because the secondary guns are absent, and I'm just going to speculate here, but I haven't actually looked at the design drafts. Maybe they got rid of the secondaries due to the aforementioned weight problems. I haven't really found anything in the sources, but it's always difficult with Soviet sources, especially that until relatively recently, most of them were inaccessible. She does get auto secondaries, so 100mm, presumably dual-purpose auto secondaries. They have an okay range, but they just don't do an awful lot, really. And she has an okay AA, not quite as good as the Stalingrad, but the difference isn't much. She's got a bit better range on a small caliber, and she's got the better skill for it as well, and significantly better concealment with 10 kilometers. So let's compare her to the Kronstadt, her other sister, and which was actually at tier 9. Just for a brief overview, yes, more armor and worse maneuverability, but somewhat better guns, yes. So, but she doesn't also get the secondaries as we had, and the AA is obviously significantly better because the Kronstadt is a tier 9 ship. Lastly, let's compare the Sevastopol to the Gneisenau, because, well, it's what it technically is. And yes, the Gneisenau has significantly better armor, because the Gneisenau is an actual battleship, although we can debate that. And the Sevastopol was more of a medium-armed battlecruiser, something like the Alaskas. And yes, the maneuverability, I will give her that, but not by an awful lot. It's the same turn time on this thing. And one thing obviously to note is that these 380 mils reload in 14 seconds instead of 18 seconds. But then again, the Gneisenau is a tier 7 ship, and this is a tier 10. The Gneisenau obviously has very good secondaries. The Gneisenau also obviously has torpedoes. The Gneisenau also obviously has auto secondaries, which are, well, sort of not as good as on the Sevastopol. But then again, the Gneisenau is a tier 7 ship, and really the auto secondaries are a bit of an afterthought. And the Gneisenau gets the secondary overload skill, and the Gneisenau actually has 150s that are worth using. And yes, the Gneisenau gets torpedoes, and obviously not quite as good of an AA as the Sevastopol, and a slightly worse concealment. So, what is the Sevastopol? There she is. It's a tier 10 Gneisenau without secondaries and torpedoes, and a bit faster reload on the main guns. The Sevastopol gets ship skills. The Sevastopol does not know what she wants to be. If you look at this, and I looked at this first, and it's like, okay, someone thought, hey, what if we took an Alaska design, threw the Gneisenau's guns onto that, gave her a French engine boost and the British Super Heal, call that a battlecruiser, slap a price tag on it, and sell it. And that's pretty much the dog's breakfast that we're seeing here. The engine boost is kind of cool, but at the same time, this thing has the Gneisenau maneuverability. The dispersion is not great, because these are Gneisenau guns, and she only gets the precise aim 1, and she only gets 2 charges of it. Now, you can do something about this in the captain skills, but you also have the Super Heal, which is the British battlecruiser thing, which gives you 75% more hit points from the repair kits, but you only get 2 of them, which means you do sort of need the improved repair kit skill, which clashes with the additional precise aim. You've got decent, you've got good AA, but at the same time, you don't really have the precision at range to be a support cruiser, and you're just way too big for that role as well. It's a very similar problem to what you have in things like the Alaska, in my opinion. The reload's good, but you only have 6 guns on this thing, which means, given the relative lack of armor, because at the end of the day it's still a cruiser, you sort of still have to be, if you're going bow in, only get 4 guns on target, which is significantly less than what you would get on, say, an Alaska, or, for that matter, on a Stalingrad. So, you can have the... I'm going to be generous and call it probably somewhat historically accurate blue camo, which gives you hit points, range, dispersion, and max traverse speed. All very good things. Or you can put the somewhat white. You can put the good uniform on, which gives you ship hit points, range, dispersion, and torpedo damage reduction, which is significantly less useful than the other one. So there's really no good reason to use this unless you get it for free from something anyway, in which case you can save yourself the money for the historical camo, because really you shouldn't. Now, you will notice that I am using premium consumables, and that's because I only got one bottle for you today, because like I said in the onset of this video, I really don't want to bore you with this for my complaints about it for longer than necessary. You get one potential elite bonus, and that's the Advanced Gun Director for better range, because the other one is useless, because it gives you torpedo damage reduction, which you don't care about, fire and flooding resistance, which you don't have enough of to make a build out of it, and even that's very questionable, and a measly 1% hit points. So don't use that, go for the range. In terms of equipment, you have Gneisenau guns, so you have a battleship turret traverse, which isn't that terrible, because you also got a battleship ship traverse, which means you can use the Mine Battery Mod 3 and be done with it, and do what you can to improve the relatively poor dispersion on these guns. And the rest is pretty similar. Yes, you could be tempted to go for the concealment system. Yes, maybe British Battlecruiser playstyle, but then again, why would you? Because this is tier 10. And the British Battlecruisers at tier 10, St. Vincent, actually has usable guns. Whereas these are the Gneisenau's guns. Now, I have put Makarov in here because I wanted to see what a APCS plus Gneisenau gun can do in tier 10. And no, let's be fair here. The APCS plus does mean that these guns hit pretty hard. And they have... if they can hit anything, they can penetrate the deck belt of the deck armor of a Yamato and score a citadel without too much trouble. And anything that's, say, French or similar is actually going to, well, suffer from the amount of firepower that you have. The problem is you only get 6 of them. So what would you do hypothetically if you were to get the ship? You would be getting the battlefield support for an additional sonar and AA, and obviously the air defense expert, which means you can do a little bit in an air defense support role. You would get the artillery maintenance. Here it gets funky because you really want the fire supremacy, because the dispersion is not great, and you want that for an additional precise aim. But you do need to use the survivalist in order to buff your HP tanking capabilities. Now the Sevastopol is relatively tanky, but she's still only a cruiser, so you're gonna need that. The rest is the obviously just Makarov special skills. You get the marksman skill, which really would help if you had another one of these. In a very French manner, you would take the engine overload. And the important skill obviously being the APCS Plus and the better deck armor and fire protection. There you have it. A tier 10 Gneisenau without torpedoes and usable secondaries. And a bit faster reload and better AA in the mix. So how do you play this ship? Well, you don't, honestly. I think I get the idea, right? I get the idea that this is meant to be something similar to, say, the Stalingrad or the Alaskas or something. And I'm not a particular fan of these things to begin with. But their guns are precise and allow you to get shots on target. they can make something happen against, say, destroyers or other cruisers. This is a cruiser killer, and this is what she was designed for. This thing is pretty good against heavy cruisers. Unfortunately, it's not very good against anything else. It doesn't have the armor or the hit points to infinitely tank enemy battleships. Now you could argue, well, then just play around islands. Yes, that's where you encounter destroyers, which is your next problem, because you have absolutely no way of defending yourself against destroyers. Yes, you have sonar. Well, that's great. You see the torpedoes coming before you try to get out of the way. You have no weapons because you only have 6 guns. They have a pretty terrible dispersion, and yeah, no. You don't have the most HE damage in the world. You just have no way to defend yourself against destroyers. Yes, you could say, well, then just play it like an Alaska and play it like a AA support cruiser. Well, yeah. You can't see me shrugging, but that's me shrugging. Anyway, I'll show you a battle, and then you can make up your own mind if you think this ship works for you or is worth your time. And we are playing Epicenter in Cage. And if you take a very close look at the enemy team, you see that there's no carrier, which means that my glorious AA is not particularly useful. You also see that there are 3 destroyers, 2 Gearings and a Shimakaze, against which I have very little that I can use. You also see that there's a Vermont and a Montana, both of which can make extremely short work of me. You'll also notice that there's a Smolensk, which is a good target for me if I can hit her, because the darn thing tends to sit in smoke screens at long ranges, or wiggle, in which case these guns tend to miss. And I've got a Zao. The Zao is probably the only ship that I really need to worry about here. But it's Epicenter Cage, let's go. We've got a bunch of our destroyers on our own side, and we will see how we can make ourselves useful using the speed, potentially using island cover, and making the best use of our British superheel that we have in this Tier 10 Soviet Battlecruiser, supercruiser, whatever. Spawning with daring here, so on the left flank, no carrier. I'm going to take a careful position at the onset and just park myself next to that little island over there and see what I can do from there to assist with things here. So daring is going into the outer ring, which is nice to see that someone is not actually going the long way around. And that spot looks about where I want to park myself. That means I am within the capture circle, at least the outer one. And I should have some defense using that ledge, and I should have some forward firepower. Now the biggest problem here is obviously that I only have 4 guns pointing forward. And there's a destroyer spotted on the eastern flank, and the daring, after going through the center, is and I'm now spotted, is hiding behind the island. Now there's the Shimakaze. So I've got the armor piercing loaded at this point. Shots out. Let's see what the armor piercing does against the Shimakaze. It over penetrates, which is, do you know what, is a great surprise. But then again, I'm not really good against destroyers, so unfortunately I have nothing else to shoot at because everything else is out of range. And the daring is getting rushed by a Shimakaze and a Gearing. So switch to the high explosive and see what we can do. And yes, these torpedoes have completely missed both of the destroyers. And the daring should be relatively safe. I've got the hydro up in case something is coming my way. I do see you, Mr. Zhao, but I am trying to help out the daring here, who is holding that flank position. And yeah, managing to hit a destroyer at 10 kilometer with these guns, not happening. I mean, you can't hit them also at 10 kilometer in a Gneisenau, but that's also not what the Gneisenau is for. So let's reload the armor piercing and see if we can do something about the only target that we actually qualified to engage, which would be the Zhao, which was sailing around there. So there he is, yeah, because he is threatening my daring. Now, of course, the Montana is shooting at me, but that's what we've got the engine boost for. And there's also the Smolensk, so maybe the rear turret can make itself useful and get a couple shots out at the Smolensk. It's the double fire from the Zhao. And yes, at this range, hello, Mr. Zhao, you do not want to sit in front of these guns broadside on. Very much not, yes, because that hurts. If I had a couple more of them, that would hurt even more. The problem is now I'm in range of the Montana, which means I need to actually hide behind the island because I am already triggering my first heal. The Zhao is dead. He's running into all the daring torpedoes. And there's a gearing coming, and the Smolensk is trying to set me on permafires. So that one super heal is already almost spent, and yes, the Montana is shooting at me again as well. And I have managed to go undetected, and I can Citadel a Montana as well. But the problem is I'm gonna die doing it. So thank you very much, Daring, for giving me that smoke. Allows me to reverse a little bit. The question is, where's that gearing going? And I think I need to vacate this spot at this point, because I am now spotted again. Daring smokes relatively short duration. Hydro up for any torpedo spotting. There's gearing, but he hasn't seen me, so he's looking at Daring. Point blank range, HE does absolutely nothing. So Daring dodges these torpedoes. Well done, Daring. But the Zao is gone, which means the main threat to the Daring has been eliminated, although he still don't want to get into a gunfight with all these people. And I've got the AP reloaded because there's really no chance of me actually hitting a gearing, so I might as well try to farm some damage on the Montana and make myself a bit scarce until I can, well, if I can hit the Montana, that is, there we go. Make myself a little bit scarce until I can manage to run my second heal, because the Montana is again shooting at me because I'm massive. There comes the second heal. Print myself a new ship and come under fire from the Vermont. So there goes that health. But the Vermont has died, and the Montana is looking relatively scratchy. And there's the Smolensk fully broadsiding, 13 kilometers, shots out, broadsiding Smolensk. Smolensk, I don't know, turns a little bit. We got still 2 hits on target, but yeah, we've done absolutely no damage. And that is the essence of the problem in this ship. So we can still get a couple of shots at Smolensk, but I'm now out of heals. And I'm down to 17,000 hit points, and I haven't really done anything. A couple over penetrations on the Smolensk, he smokes up. I can still get some blind shots at the Monty. We're not getting the Ruffle Stomp medal anyway, because one of us has died, so it's not super important that I survive, but we'll see what we can still do. The Smolensk fire coming from the smoke screen. I was hoping with that shot that I might actually blind hit him. But yeah, that's all the health I'm gonna get. And since I don't really see where the Smolensk is, Montana's dead anyway, so I might as well. Oh yeah, there he is. Hello. Let's get a couple of shots out at Smolensk. 8 kilometer range. Smolensk. Yeah, that was one citadel, but we only got 2 of our 4 forward turrets actually hitting the target. A more or less broadsiding Smolensk at 7 kilometers, which means he lives to fight another day. And before I can shoot again, the Iowa actually takes him out, which means I only need to dodge his torpedoes. And let's see where I came out in the team. And we have done 80,000 points. We have taken 80,000 points of damage and done 47. And we were almost dead at the end of the game. That really tells you a lot about the ship. Now, we have scored 4 citadels, and I'm not saying that the guns don't slap. They do. They hurt. The problem is you only have 6 of them, and you have a very hard time to get them on target. The secondaries are, well, there's none of them, so you can really just ignore that. The main guns is all you're ever going to get. And yes, we have, once that flips, landed at the bottom of our team, below the Shimakaze, who has also not done an awful lot. Now, is this a bad ship? In my opinion, yes, it is. As it stands, it's extremely situational. If you get into a carrier battle, and if you have a lot of heavy cruisers on the enemy team, and if the enemy battleships don't pay any attention to you, and if you get the situation that you can stick with one of your battleships and you don't have to deal with any destroyers, and if that battleship then comes under air attack and you can lend some AA defense, then you're relatively useful. Otherwise, you're an oversized Soviet damage piñata that only use is to draw fire away from your destroyers or other ships so they can do the damage for you. And if that is something that you enjoy, I am not criticizing anybody for their preferences, then by all means go for it. Personally, I'm not so much into that, so I'm going to give that one a skip. And that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.